there is really something that needs clarifying, please raise your hand. I'll try and keep it simple and straightforward. So off we go. I'll share my screen. So you should all now be able to see the presentation. The link to this will be shared with you as well, and so you can all have access to this presentation and download it and do what you will with it as well. So I'm presenting the IUCN Green List, which essentially is about fair and effective protected areas and how we as a global community can try and increase the number of those protected and conserved areas that are fully functioning and delivering successful conservation results. So part of the rationale, the global rationale as to why is IUCN developing a sustainability standard for protected areas, it's rooted in the global policy from the Convention on Biological Diversity, and in particular the Target 11 from the Aichi targets, which deals with protected areas. And this target has, for all the global countries that have signed up, it has two elements to it. One is a percentage coverage, which recommends 17% of terrestrial and 10% of marine areas. And the other elements of the target are more around the quality of those identified protected and conserved areas. And so as you can see globally on the left of the picture, you can see the progress from the year 2000 to our aim by 2020 is pretty good. It meets certainly the target. Nearly 60 million square kilometers, which is an average of pushing 17%. So it's very, very good. And then from the marine side as well is a significant increase. So in terms of the quantity of protected areas, global targets are doing more or less okay. But as you can see on the right-hand side, some of the more qualitative elements. So are these areas in the right place? Are they effective? And so on. These are not so well achieved. And globally, we see that the number of protected areas in place that are not managed up to a standard, they're not delivering conservation results, or even their paper parks are not working at all, is significantly high. And so our program through the Green List, the aim is to try and shift the focus onto the quality of protected areas and try and put in place a standard and a program that can help countries and help sites actually improve their performance. So helping them improve in performance, but also helping verify that that performance is in place. And so for this, we developed the Green List standard. This has been developed over a number of years, global consultation, following best practice in standards development, and it was finally approved just in November 2017. The standard is fairly straightforward. It has 4 components. You can see these on the left. It starts with good governance, sound design and planning, and effective management. And these 3 components combined will hopefully help you deliver conservation outcomes. And so the IUCN Green List standard describes fairly simply how a site can put in place good governance, good design and planning, effective management and operations, and help the site deliver conservation outcomes. So really the standard is a description for successful protected areas in the 21st century. And it's a guide for different sites to use to help them improve their performance. So here again, just quickly, is the hierarchy. You can see that we have 3 central elements, and then combined, these deliver the successful conservation outcomes as I just described. Among those 3 core components and the conservation outcomes, there are just 17 criteria that actually describe the success. So each criterion takes on a different element under each of the components, and combined they help you really frame what successful conservation in protected areas looks like. So these criteria are set globally. They don't change. They're globally consistent. That is the heart of the Green List standard. However, each of these criterion has a number of indicators, and across the 17 there are more or less 50 generic indicators. And these are the steps that a site can follow that that showcase how you meet the criteria. So there's steps towards achieving each criterion. And these indicators are adaptable to a local and regional context. So for example, in our case, for Natura 2000. So this means that while the standard is globally consistent, the means and the steps you take to achieve success within the context of a particular country or region, is flexible and adaptable. And so we have something that is locally applicable but globally consistent. So here on this slide, you can see just a breakdown of the headlines of each of the criterion and how they fit under the components. The standard document itself contains much more detail and explanation, guidance notes, and so on. So these are I've just taken for the PowerPoint just to help showcase kind of the headline for each of these. But as you can see, good governance, sound design and planning, and effective management, the three on the left, these are the major kind of input measures, and this is kind of the classic description of protected areas and management effectiveness that we've used all along. So those 14 criterion will then hopefully combine to help you deliver on the right-hand side, which is the demonstration of conservation of major natural values, conservation of ecosystem service values, and conservation of major cultural values. So essentially, the green list describes how you put in place a governance system that helps you describe what are the values of a site, and then to help frame management around conservation of those values and protection of those values, management of those values, and then it will help then guide you on how you demonstrate that these values are being effectively conserved. So just jumping away from the standards, this slide just shows a little bit of the history. We've not been in business that long. We began the green list really in earnest in late 2012 and into 2013. IUCN, we're a global network. We work towards the mandate of our members through resolutions. So in 2012, there was a resolution requesting IUCN to develop a sustainability standard for protected areas, which we labeled the green list. And we began a pilot phase for 2 years, leading to the World Parks Congress in 2014. And our pilot phase included France, Spain, and Italy. And from those 3 countries, we had 8 pilot sites, which were recognized successfully through that pilot phase and were provisionally given a green list certificate. Based on the lessons from our pilot phase, we continued then to develop the standard, to consult widely, integrate feedback and comments, test a little bit more, until we really brought this through our event in Hawaii and a conventional biological diversity event in Mexico, then to have just last year our IUCN Council approve the final version of the Green List Standard. And also we began this EC Life project at that point as well. So in 2018, we're very much operational, still in the development phase. We're still testing, learning by doing, but we're not piloting anymore. We're doing things. Part of that relates then to Europe and to this LIFE project, and we have the chance to test as well as to implement the green list in Europe. And with all of you and your support, we hope to get the feedback and to make this product as good as it can possibly be, and to really support the protected and conserved areas in Europe to the best degree possible. So we're looking ahead to this year and next year to really showcasing some results as well. So just a step back into the context. So ultimately, the IUCN Green List is 2 things. It's a list, so it will be a list of the world's best performing sites. It will link to a global database as well for that list, and it will have a brand and a visibility to that list to the program. But the green list is also globally, as I've just described, it is the standard. So behind that list is the standard, and the standard really is the heart, the beating heart, the pulse of the green list. So the list of sites is great, but really what the green list is about is that standard and helping sites measure their progress and performance against that standard. The green list is implemented locally. We establish national or jurisdictional expert teams. We define success, like I've said, through the indicators in a local and regional context, and then we validate site performance. So there's that degree of independent validation that when we say a site is achieving the green list standard, that there's a proper process of due diligence and evaluation and assessment that goes in there, and that decision is based on an assured process. So a couple of important things about the Green List program as well. It's voluntary. So the Green List is not imposed on a site. It's not a national assessment. It's not something that IUCN will come and do to your site or to partner country sites. It is something that builds on local and national commitment, hopefully through a number of incentives around investment, the focus on improved performance, the value of getting recognition, and the value of having a certification scheme. So but it's voluntary, and so ultimately, if we feel at IUCN that we really achieve already a result when we get commitment from any site or any jurisdiction to help. There's a decision and a commitment to improve the performance of a protected area, to put the focus more on quality, not quantity, and so on. So just really hold that it is voluntary, and I hope all of you have already volunteered to be part of this program, and so you get the point that this is not something we're imposing on you, but we really value the participation in the Green List as a network. And so really what's the ultimate aim of the Green List is to reward success. We feel that there's not enough focus on positive examples and reinforcing what is working in conservation. There's a lot of kind of the red listing approach of highlighting the threats and the issues and the challenges, and that's still very, very important. But we feel that the Green List gives a nice counterbalance and some more incentive and inspiration, visibility to those sites, and ultimately the men and women working in those sites to get the recognition and the visibility for the good work that they're doing. I mentioned assurance. So the Green List runs on the credibility principles of the ISEAL Alliance. So that's the International Social and Environmental Accreditation and Labeling Alliance. So this defines best practice. As you can see, here's some of the guidance that we're following, including assessing the impacts of social and environmental standard systems, and also how you set social and environmental standards. So we have an assurance provider, which is ASI, and they provide independent reviewers assigned to each jurisdiction. We're also, through developing the assurance, we've been able to have a lot of comparison and compatibility with other programs. So the Forest Stewardship Council, Blue Flag Beaches, World Heritage and Ramsar designations, and so on. We've been able to take a lot of the lessons and integrate this into how we operate the Green List program and how we provide this independent assurance to it. I'm not going to go into too much detail now, just in the webinar. This information is available in our user manual, but essentially we separate, you can see on the top bar, this is kind of the independent evaluation. So we have these EAGLES, which I'll come on to. These are the national or regional expert assessment groups that we establish, who really are the engine of the Green List, and they carry out the objective assessment, and they are supported and monitored and assessed by an independent reviewer. So the top line and the bottom line are really separate from the IUCN program. So our committee, they are the ones who finally have to say yes or no whether a site meets the Green List standard. We have as part of that committee, we have a standard committee which basically maintains the standard, the integrity of the standard, and that the standard is not watered down, or it's not changed, or it's not manipulated in any way. The bottom section is, as I just explained, is our independent oversight body, and we assign a reviewer to each jurisdiction that we're working in. And so then in the middle, we have our Green List operations and management committee, of which I'm part, and then we work with partner countries, partner agencies, partner organizations. We also train and assign mentors, and ultimately our aim is to help the sites that apply to go through the proper process and to be assessed and to benefit from all the support that we can provide around implementing the IUCN Green List standard. So you guys hopefully would be in this middle band, helping the sites to put forward their case for review by the EAGLE, and then the reviewer and the oversight will make sure that that's all done properly, and so that we can trust the credibility of the process. So essentially, this idea of establishing EAGLES, expert assessment groups, here's just a quick overview, but essentially they're expected to spend 10 to 20 days per year, and their main role is to adapt indicators to the local context. So, for example, we've been working on a Natura 2000 scale and looking to adapt indicators that Natura 2000 sites could use. So then we would have EAGLE groups either at a country level or at a regional level, who would then help assess candidates and evaluate them against the the green list standard and against those indicators that are put in place. So really the evaluation is carried out by this EAGLE team and not by the independent reviewer. The independent reviewer simply audits the process and makes sure that everything is in place, all the documents, everything is visible, transparent, and follows the due procedures. So again, a little bit complicated on the slide, but you can take this away and have a look at it and understand it. The green list flows through 5 main steps. And as I said, it's voluntary. The main interest is to engage participating agencies, countries, and sites to grow a green list community and to offer the types of support and network incentives to help encourage sites to commit to improving their performance. The next step is really in terms of diagnosis. Because we have a standard, we can then promote the different tools which will help you assess your performance against that standard. And this is a broad range of tools. We're not prescribing one or another. We're basically saying whichever tool you are using, we can then show how far the information or that assessment will get you against the green list criteria. And this can then help put a baseline report for any participating site with a diagnosis of how much investment and activity is needed to potentially achieve the full criteria and to achieve the green list. So with this diagnosis, then it's also helpful to then, for investment, to develop clear plans on what is needed, what targets are there, how can investment help increase the capacity and improve the performance. So what are the gaps that might exist in any site that would need to be invested in and would need to be improved in order to achieve the green list criteria and ultimately achieve the green list status. So that evaluation, we have a green list metrics, which I'm just coming on to. We have the independent verification through the reviewer and the EAGLE, and therefore we can also measure an evaluation of performance. So for any participating site, over time, we can give a very clear and validated feedback as to how much the site has actually improved and how much still needs to be done to achieve the green list. At the end, we have the certification. It's valid for 5 years. We can provide different reports back to the investor on exactly how far the site has improved. And then, of course, the big value for us is the recognition as well, and promoting the sites that are successful and getting this global network of demonstration of what is working. So just quickly, for any site that participates, we're trying to put forward a very simple metric. This is still in development, but ultimately against each of the criterion, then for each participating site, there's some feedback as to how well the site is performing against that criterion. So obviously we hope that many sites will fully meet the criteria or even exceed the criteria, but there's also an element where the data and the assessment simply might not be there. It's not possible to say whether a site is achieving a criterion or not. And then also there may be initially a limited alignment or a partial alignment. And so the actual diagnosis of what is then needed to fully meet the criterion can be provided. So the metrics can give almost like a scorecard or some guidance to different participating protected areas on how well they're performing and how much further they need to work and to invest in order to achieve the green list standard. So the investment in performance will help achieve the green list standard, and we can track exactly how that works. So I have a very quick case study of this this is not obviously in Europe, it's a site in Vietnam. We are working globally on the green list. I was in Vietnam last week and I was working on this site, so hence I'm just presenting it. So Van Long Nature Reserve is a very small protected area. It's near Hanoi. It's in a very urban setting, but it's the stronghold for the critically endangered Delacour langur, which you can see in the main picture. So Van Long Nature Reserve signed up to the green list early on. We have some project support and lots of partnerships supporting the area. But in 2015, when it joined the green list, we provided the diagnosis on the different activities and improvements and put a plan in place on how we could improve the site. But initially there was a lot of data that was not available, especially around governance, how tourism revenues, how tourism was managed, how it's all shared, how local people were allowed to interact with the wetland areas, and so on and so forth. For the design and planning, it was quite clear, but some areas and some values were really not well reflected in management. The existing management, the plan was out of date, but there was some successful description of threats, and there was definitely some strong compliance effectiveness in there. And certainly the langur, the monkey population, was doing very, very well. But the site could not actually, they hadn't done any surveys. They just understood that there was an improvement in the site values, but they couldn't quantify exactly how much. So in 2015, we estimated that the site was about 22% along the road to achieving the green list standard. 3 years later, just now, there's been a 65% improvement and increase in the performance of this site, mostly around compiling data on governance, resolving some challenges around boundary demarcation, a renewed management plan that had full local participation, and the surveys have revealed the current status of the langur population, which is an incredible 500% increase. So that the site is very, very near to the green list criteria, and the feedback from the Eagle is that they just need to improve the tourism management, put in place a little bit more in terms of a benefit sharing arrangement, and then that should probably help them meet the governance criteria and the effective management criteria, and in which case they would most likely be green listed if they implement these actions within the next 6 months to 1 year. So this is just a case study example of how the green list standard and the program helped benchmark performance and helped put in place a very clear means for a site to improve and to invest in better performance. So ultimately, the green list sites that enter become candidates, and the candidates work towards meeting all the performance criteria. And you are not assessed, you don't fail the green list. You only keep working until you become a green list site based on the results of your conservation. And once you're a green list site, you need to maintain that. You will be expected to maintain the standards and to continue to demonstrate successful conservation results. But there's not a pass or fail. The green list is really a program that's designed really to lift up sites and to provide the network support and to really put the focus on delivering conservation success rather than just putting on the inputs and just on disparate different activities and inputs. So we're hoping that there will be an added value and a benefit from the green list, including visibility, recognition. We're partnering with National Geographic, Nature. You can see here there was a lot of interest in France during our pilot phase as well. We haven't invested so much in communications yet, but once we get things up to the next level, we'd hope that we could really provide some good publicity and good visibility for participating sites, candidates, as well as successfully greenlist sites. The benefits, this is something that we're hoping that through this process, you can give us a lot of feedback. I won't go through that list, but top of it is visibility and recognition for your efforts, increased motivation, incentives to find solutions. This is a performance-based investment framework for public and private investors, for donors, government to help them report. Any protected area management effectiveness or other assessment results and scorecards that you've used, the green list process can help validate those, accept them, and then provide this global benchmark for success. And we're hoping as well it's cost effective, it is tailored to the resource needs, and also we're hoping to bring new and additional finance and resources through the green list program, and then to help build a community over time. So I'll stop my presentation there, and I'll hand back over to Marta.
Thank you very much, James, for that presentation. I am now going to share my screen as well. I think I am sharing my screen. All right. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our specific project. Basically, this is a small feasibility study to see if this global standard can be adapted and can be of added value to the Natura 2000 network. So the project started in May of last year and will run until almost the end of next year. Oh, sorry. Yes, here we go. So what have we done so far? First, we got a group of experts together, experts on protected area management, on Natura 2000, and we call these experts the European Core Working Group. So their primary mission, so to say, was to adapt the generic indicators of the green list to the Natura 2000 context. And this has now been recently completed. And in the testing fact sheet that we sent all of you, these are the indicators that you see. So these are the adapted ones. And then we had an open call for sites that wanted to be engaged in the testing phase of this project. We have applications from 55 sites across 20 EU countries that are now engaged and participating in the testing phase, which is fantastic. Initially, we had only foreseen to test the indicators in around 20 sites, but because there was a high level of interest and a large volume of applications, we've made the decision to try and keep as many people as possible engaged with this process. So what is exactly the testing phase? The first step is the standard testing form that you've received. And you will have until the end of August to complete this standard testing form. And we will look into it a bit more in detail now. But so first off, please read the instructions before starting and clarify anything you're not sure about with us. So all of you have an IUCN focal point. This is someone from the office here in Brussels or from the office in the Med that is here for you. If you have any questions, if you need to clarify anything, you can always drop us an email and we'll help clarify any questions you have. And then some of you also have a mentor, so a member of the team or of the European Core Working Group that will provide a bit more support if needed. So now I'm going to switch quickly to the table. So the first tab in this table is the instructions. Let me just, okay. Just read these before you start, see if everything makes sense. If not, again, please let us know. And then each of the tabs here are focused on the 4 components of the green list. So for component 1, you have some guidelines. So this comes from the green list sustainability standard. These are the criterion guidelines and notes to give you a bit of an idea of what the criterion is about. And then you have the specific adapted indicators. So for example, the first one here, the site's governance structure is clearly defined and documented and in accordance with relevant national, regional, local, or customary authority specifications. So then you have a couple of questions. How well does the site meet this indicator? And you can pick from the drop-down menu, in your opinion, how well does the site meet this indicator? Then the next question, how important do you consider it to be for the site? So does this indicator capture something that you think is quite critical for your site to perform well and to achieve good conservation outcomes or not? And then you have a free text field so that you can give us more specific information about how exactly your site meets this indicator. So please try and give us as much detail as possible. Try to give complete answers, just a bit of a rationale, a summary. And then the final question per indicator is, which means of verification could you provide for the indicator? Again, this is free text. You can tell us the means of verification in bullet point format or in a narrative. On the left-hand side, you have some suggestions. So the means of verifications are any sort of document that your site has that substantiates, that explains or provides evidence of your site meeting the indicator. So this can be your management plan, for instance. Your management plan will probably be a means of verification for many, many of these indicators. And then we provide several suggestions, but please note that you do not need to have all of these. Maybe one means of verification is sufficient, and that is fine. But if you have several, then please do tell us about it. And again, if you provide also a little bit of a description of each means of verification, that will also make it easier for us to then evaluate your standard testing form. The format is the same for the 4 components. The questions are the same. If while you are collecting the information for the standard testing form, you are not sure what any of these indicators means exactly or what is being asked, get in touch with us, either your mentor or your IUCN focal point, and we'll be happy to clarify. So this is the first step of the testing phase. So again, we've given you until the end of August. We understand that this catches the summer holidays. So if you need a little bit longer into September, this should also be okay. Just let us know. It shouldn't be a problem. So then what happens next? Throughout until the end of August, your mentor or IUCN focal point will assist you in completing the standard testing fact sheet. And then once you've submitted them, they'll be graded. So James was mentioning this example from Vietnam, where each indicator, each criteria, each component gets a grade. And basically this is what the ECWG and the IUCN focal points will do, is look at the information you've provided and assess how close to meeting the green list indicator you are. And so this is the scale. You can see if you have not provided enough data, it would be data deficient. And then you have different grades for the amount of alignment. So fully complete would mean that your site fully meets the indicator, and then there's even an exceeds requirements one if you're truly excelling in a certain aspect. These grades will be aggregated, so each indicator will have a grade, and then we put those together to give the criterion a grade, we put those together to give the component a grade, and finally your entire site will get a grade of how close you are to meeting the standard. In addition to this, you'll also receive more specific feedback on your site. What exactly you can do, there we go, in order to get closer to meeting the indicators, or you're not quite there yet. In addition to this, there will also be another form with what we call some meta questions. These are questions about how much time and effort did it take you to complete this form? How useful did you find this process? So questions more about the process of the testing phase, which will also be very useful for us then, because we need to write a final report to the European Commission where we assess how this whole project worked out, the testing phase, etc., and then recommend next steps for the implementation of the green list to the Natura 2000 network. Now, I would please ask you to check the webpage that you can access through that link. Again, we will make this presentation available to you, and the session is also being recorded. For those of you who were not able to attend in person today, please check this webpage. We have listed all of the participating sites, and we have included some links where we found them. Just check that the information we have in there is correct. If you'd prefer us to change something, use a different URL, you can let us know. You can let your IUCN focal point know, and we'll make those changes. It would also be great to receive information about any communications activities that you do in relation to this project. So if you publish anything on a newsletter, you do a news article, social media posts, just let us know that you've done this. And finally, for our own communications, it would be great to have photos of your sites for us to use. So we've created a Dropbox folder, and if you have photos that you give IUCN permission to use, just please add them to the Dropbox folder. Make sure you include the name of the site and the name of the photographer, because we also want to give credit to the photographer always. All right. So that was the main presentation. And now we are going to open the Q&A session. So the way we can do this is you can ask the question either in the chat box, or you can tell me that you would like the word, and then you can speak as well. So I'm now happy to start the Q&A session. If there's anything that you would like me to go more into detail that wasn't clear from the presentation, anything at all. Okay, there do not appear to be any questions. Is there any aspect of the testing phase that you would like me to go a bit more in detail about? On the maintenance. Okay, Anna, thank you. The maintenance of what? Sorry, could you just be a bit more specific? The phase after validation. All right. So yes, so one point that is important to make here is that this is a small feasibility study, so not all the steps of the global green list will apply in this project. I think what you're asking me is, once you've achieved the green list status, how do you keep it going, right? So there are periodical reevaluations where basically you just need to reconfirm that you still have everything in place that you did at the time of getting the green list status in the first place. I would like to stress that through this project, also because of the timeline, it is unlikely that all of you will achieve the green list status by the end of the project. But what will happen is that if the European Commission decides that this is indeed of added value to the network and decides to go ahead and roll this out, you'll be kind of at the front line. You'll be the first in place to actually get the site visits and the review, etc., to achieve this green list status. In terms of how long the whole process of certification takes, this depends very much on the site. Imagine that you have a site that is already doing a fantastic job on all the indicators. The process can be very fast. I think that even in a year you could do it. Whereas if there are areas that still need to be improved, it's a process. So you would get feedback on what needs to be implemented in the site to meet all the indicators, and then you would go back and do it. So it could take even several years depending on how far along you are in terms of meeting all the indicators. And then to Vasilis and Katerina's question about providing means of verification in other languages than English, Greek, for example. You can, and we can try to use Google Translate to understand what this is, but please note that it will be much harder for us to understand what you're providing us and then to evaluate what you're sending us. If there is the option of sending it to us in English, or just send us something in Greek, but also a summary in English so that we know what it is, that would be really helpful for us. Because yeah, we can only use Google Translate to try and understand what you're sending us in Greek. And then Graziano is asking, I would like to know how we'll continue the testing phase after August, after the sites provide the standard testing form. Yes, thank you, Graziano. So at the end of August, we will probably send you those meta questions I was telling you about. So that will be another document for you to fill in. It will be really quick. That one won't take very long. And then for a period of time, your standard testing form will be evaluated. So that will probably take at least a month, maybe two, for us to look at the information you've provided and to send the grading and to send the feedback back to you. But by the end of the year, this should be concluded. And then Dragos is asking, is the RAPAM tool relevant to the IUCN green list method? So as I understand it, the RAPAM tool is also a tool for assessment of management effectiveness. If you've used this tool already, then the information you've collected through that will definitely be very useful for this. But that's it. And then Anna is asking, mentors will be available until the end of the project in 2019. Yes, so the mentors will be available throughout the whole testing phase. And we want you to engage with your mentors. So they're there to help you. So please make use of them, and us as well here in the office. We want to learn from this experience as well. This is kind of the first step on looking into how this should work and what's helpful and what's not, etc. So the more we interact and the more feedback there is back and forth between us, the better. Even for the grading, for example, your mentor may get back to you and say, all right, so for this indicator, I feel like you've not provided enough information from me to give you a grade. Can you send me something else? And in that case, you would have an opportunity to still send more information on a specific indicator. Then Dragos has another question. Is this method efficient for small protected areas with the not so relevant heritage? So that's a great question. And that's something that we're looking into. We want to figure out if it is. We think it is, but this project is also an opportunity to look at it. The Natura 2000 network has so many different types of sites with so many different types of governance, management, etc., that we want to have a tool that can help any type of site, including the small protected areas, to improve their management and to achieve their conservation outcomes. In terms of examples, do you mean examples of small protected areas that have been on the green list? If that's what you mean, yes, okay. I don't have any here. I can check with James after if there are any. And I can share those with you. Then from Dries, how many areas are already green listed in Europe? There are some in France. I don't know the exact number, but in terms of Europe, France is the country that is the most further ahead in terms of applying the green list nationally. And then I know that Spain and Italy are also kind of behind, a little bit behind France on the process, but also quite further along. And then Michael is asking, can we propose to skip certain indicators if they do not apply at all to the Natura 2000 context in your country? All right, so that's also a good question. And if an indicator is not applicable to your area, you just need to explain why. Just in the free text box, tell us why it's not applicable, and then we can look into this. And also the EAGLE the European Core Working Group will evaluate that information and see if indeed it is not applicable, then that is fine, and that indicator would not be used to assess your site. Okay, Dragos, thank you for looking forward to this project. We're also very excited about this, and we like to think of this as we're all a team, and you guys are the first ones that are helping us to shape the green list to the Natura 2000 network. So it's a fantastic opportunity to see what works and what doesn't. So if you have any feedback at all, you will have the opportunity to provide it to us through these meta questions, but also in your email interactions with us. Let us know what you think, etc. All right, any other questions? We still have some time. I'll give it a couple more. I don't know if, James, you have anything else that you would like to add now here at the end?
Thanks, Marta. Thanks, everyone, for those questions. No, I think that's they're really exactly the types of questions, and we're hoping that through the process of your participation, you can give us some more, some more challenging things to think about and some issues to raise. And we're really committed to try to make this work for Natura 2000 sites. I think just a couple of points there to raise. The first one was the question about RAPAM, for example, and other tools. So totally, the green list is not trying to create a situation where you need to do repeat assessments or use new tools. If you've already done some good assessments, you already have evidence, you already have documentation, then that will definitely count towards the green list assessment. So we're trying to make it as integrated as possible. We have a data management system that's very efficient and can quickly assimilate data from other sources or other databases. And so we wanted to, over time, come up with a menu of the best tools which will get you the answers to the greenest criteria. But as we're starting out, we really have, we're very agnostic as to which tool you might use. And RAPAM is one that looks at the system and could help, provide some information also about the site as part of that system review. The Management Effectiveness Tracking tool is another one that's very popular worldwide. And several countries have their own protected area management effectiveness assessment methodologies. And so the green list is adaptable to use any of these methodologies, providing that they do actually provide the right information against all the criteria. And what the green list process provide is validation of the results of those assessments, which otherwise you might not have. Many of the assessments are self-assessments or are done without a kind of a more objective review or audit or evaluation of the robustness of the results. So the green list can provide you with that as well. So that's, and if there's any other questions, that's it from me as well. Thank you very much for taking part.
Thank you, James. Dragos had another question there. Is this project addressed to protected areas that are funded by the government? Because in Romania, most of them are not and are managed by volunteers. This is fine. This is a voluntary process. The people that are actually managing the sites are the ones that can engage with the green list. And so they do not have to be funded by the government. Great. Okay.
This is James again. So just sorry, there was a question about existing greenlist sites in Europe. So we have the France and Spain and Italy from the pilot phase. We had a total of 8 sites in Europe, 5 of which were in France. And for this current phase in France, there's about another 20 candidate sites that are being put forward. And they include all types of governance, so all the way from the big national parks right down to Conservatoire Littoral and the kind of the local level. The other point is that we also have cluster sites already in our program, so that there's some sites which are joint nomination, so it's 2 or 3 sites that together add up to conservation of a particular value or species or habitat, and so they're assessed individually, but the outcome is as a unit, and so that's something to bear in mind with Natura 2000 sites as well. Is that we would look at the largest number of sites that make sense for whichever habitat values or species values are being put forward. So you can come in as a joint nomination, which has several benefits, including reducing the transaction costs and not having to do an assessment for each tiny component, but looking more at the sum of the evidence, the sum of the values, the sum of the work going on for a particular cluster of sites.
Okay, great. So I think that if there are no further questions, we can conclude the webinar a little bit ahead of time, and we will make the recording available. We will send you the presentation, and I'll just reiterate again, do not hesitate to get in touch with us if there are any questions. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day, and I'll talk to you all soonish. Bye.